877-928-8822 or visit heartdrop.com.
Extend your life with Extendovite.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and FreedomSlips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, FreedomSlips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Stumbling down the road with Bridgette Lyn Dolgoff as she carries stones, digs holes, and wheels her shovels on her way. This road is the real path. It is never easy and never clear, but always entertaining. This journey has not been a seated event, as Bridgette walks, runs, stumbles, carries, digs, drags, laughs, fights, sings, prays, dances, kicks, screams, and oftentimes falls.
Hey.
Hey, I think we're still in promos. Okay, hey, this is Bridgette Lyn Dolgoff. And this is Carrying Stones and Digging Holes radio show. And I am your host for the next 2 hours. Let me just kind of set up here so that I can see some other information while I'm on radio. Anyway, today is Saturday. That's the time of my show. So we are listener supported. That is Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. Our whole network and everything that everybody does on this network is completely 100% volunteer to bring you information that we may think is important. Sometimes we blab on, and sometimes we have guests, and sometimes we have interesting information for the public. So you can go to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, and you can click on the funding bar, and you can find different ways that you can actually fund us. Actually saving seeds is probably a good thing, since the whole food supply has collapsed. I mean, we're past the is into has. So the whole food system in the U.S. has collapsed as far as a majority of it. So you may want to get those heirloom seeds in case you're going to need to grow some food this summer, or maybe in a few days start planting those seeds. All right, so today I have a return guest, a friend of mine, and his name is Ryan Hunter, and we're just going to talk a lot about a lot of different stuff. And I have conversations with Ryan that I don't get to have with other people, and we talk a lot about dreaming and stalking and intention, attention, and different kinds of, old concepts that we kind of put new language to, and work that, spiritual work that we do. So, and the way that we understand it. So, hey, Ryan, are you there? Hello.
Yep. I'm
All
right here.
right. Hey, so I was the last couple of days. Okay, so this has kind of like been going on, and this is what Ryan and I usually talk about anyway. We get together periodically and just have chats about this stuff because a lot of people really are still kind of stuck in the whole new age concepts, and to me, a lot of those are propaganda. So we get together and we talk. So we're just going to have a conversation like normal, like, you know, how we would talk to each other. But I was thinking the other day about how slow this world is. And, you know, like in the later books of Carlo Castaneda, he talks about how Matthews hated this world. And I think it's because, you know, it takes so much, you know, attention to detail to be able to hold energy long enough that you can actually shift it. And I'm not talking about, you know, manifesting. That's just kind of along the bullshit line too. But I was thinking about how in 2004, I wanted to get into the herbal medicine program. And there was a program that I really wanted to do in New Mexico. And I applied for this full college in Silver City, New Mexico. And what happened was that the college, I had to have all these letters of recommendation. You know, it was like kind of a really big formal deal. And I got accepted. I got in. I was in the process of going to be relocating in 2005 because I think this program was like 2 years, and it was pretty much full time. And then in 2005, I get a letter saying that the college is closing for a year because they want to become federally kind of not regulated, but they want to be able to, you know, get granting and stuff like that from the federal government. I'm not sure the college ever reopened after that. And so my program didn't get to start, and then, you know, never could get back into it because the college closed, and I'm not even sure if it reopened. And so from 2004 on, you know, I kept looking, and I even like relocated to different cities because, you know, I was living in my car, trying to find, you know, herbal medicine programs. And then until I found Rudolf Steiner. But anyway, so recently, last week, I found out that a program that I've been wanting to basically do for 3 years finally was open. So I actually, you know, got in. And it's a 6-month program over the summer. But I was thinking about like how slow this world is, you know, and like how sluggish the fields are, and how, you know, complicated like each, you know, program that's operating is. And I was thinking about like, you know, it takes your whole life just to make, you know, like 5 steps. So it's taken like 14 years to finally get an herbal medicine program, you know, and holding that intention for 14 years in order to make it happen. And that's a long time. I mean, considering that most of us physically aren't going to live that long, especially because a lot of us aren't really doing, you know, work, like proper attention work, you know, proper work that can actually keep our bodies alive for a longer period of time. But anyway, so there was this thing that, hold on one second, I just wanted to, there was a, my computer is going to be cranky. All right, so there was just this thing I saw on one of the websites that I contribute on as a contributor. And it was talking about like karma and your spirit guides and all this stuff that's like, it's not real. None of it's real. A lot of that stuff is like propaganda. And, you know, and the higher self. I mean, the thing is, like, you don't really need to believe in a higher self if you can actually, you know, hold your attention into the fourth attention. You don't really need anything other than that. Kind of a concept. So I replied on I did a reply on it. And basically, you know, because, you know, karma is just collective and inherited behavior, which is now kind of more, you know, dissolved into our DNA. And so it's the behavior
Right.
that causes the problems. And so there is no karma. It's your behavior and your subconscious mind that are playing out, that are keeping the same program, and you're just going down the same line. And I had a Lakota Sioux medicine woman teacher, and we've talked about this before, Ryan, and she said, that we carry 7 generations of this history from our dad's side and from our mom's side. One side of our gut has that father stuff all the way up 7 lines, and then our mother's side 7 lines. And then in the native system, 7 generations is equal to 3,500 years. So, within our genetic inherited behavior, collective behavior, that's a lot. That's a lot of, bad stuff that I almost said the F word. It's the only word we can't say on radio, but it's a lot of effery going on that has to be cleared.
Right. Well, and we live in a cesspool of it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's so yeah. There were several points. So the herbal medicine school is what pushed us. I was originally going to be on next week, right? And thinking that we would talk about, I don't know, maybe the money system a bit, and get on to some probably more conspiracy stuff than we've talked about. We're usually, talking about dreaming and shamanism and sorcery, right? But with Mercury and Pisces and just the energy of this day, I think we're going to keep it more esoteric. And I was thinking about talking specifically about sort of compare and contrast, where we've gotten to versus where humanity naturally ought to be. Because we've gotten ourselves. You're talking about karma, okay? And Alan Watts always used to say, karma is your doing, right? And that's the old understanding of it, before it kind of came and became New Agey in the West, was people had a concept of taking responsibility for their lives, for their own experience. And you're doing, so it is true. And we've talked about this on previous shows. We construct our reality, our perceptions, everything that we think the world is a mental construct. And we'll get into that later on. But so in one way, if something's bothering you, it's your doing. On the other hand, it's not directly your doing, is it? Because there is, despite all of the particulars of this world being mental constructs, it's not just a dream that you're making up as it goes along, right? There's some energetic truth underlying this world that we are interpreting in order to construct this reality that we live in. And there is some fundamental constraint about what is actually going on underneath the blankets, behind the screen, whatever metaphor you want to stick in there. And so whatever this negativity is that's manifesting in your life, well, you're projecting it, but it's a consequence of something that's real. On the other hand, the patterns that exist in your life, as a being that's going through this world and making choices, all of which have consequences. I prefer the Taoist concept of the polar unity, because it kind of shows, okay, one thing and its opposite are not separate things. They're one phenomenon. They're two aspects of a single thing. And if you run out to the extreme of either end, you really get to the same point anyway. It turns all of our spectra into circles. And that's great because it illustrates the projectiveness of our mind space. What we do out in this direction is going to circle around. It'll follow through and come back to bite us, in the ass or whatever. Because that pattern that we initiate with our reality, right? We have our self and our environment, and there's a relationship between the two. We set up the patterns with every choice that we make. We set up, and these are not necessarily even physical choices, maybe mental choices, how you choose to think about things. But we set up patterns of interaction, and those patterns will follow all the way through. And you've got to have a more circumspect understanding of what these things are to understand what karma is. But it is your doing. It is not something that is imposed upon you. That exists too in this world, but it's something different. It is not, the part that's imposed on us is really what we're entrained with, and it's not real, and it's not there to enrich our souls and get us on the path to perfection, as all of the rhetoric will tell you. It's just there to keep us boxed in and drain us of all of our vital energy, really.
Just there to keep us busy and occupied from doing anything else.
So I want to go back to this idea of heaven versus hell, of our original Eden, of the paradise lost, and kind of look at how we've thought ourselves into the web that we're caught up in right now. Because reality is constructed, and it's constructed, that's another point I wanted to get back to, the higher self. So there is a thing, and if you do go to the fourth attention, I sometimes use the term higher mind, really, they call it the eighth chakra. I don't, higher self gets kind of bandied around by people that I don't totally want to associate with, so I don't use that term much. But there is another chakra above the crown. And the point is, I've mentioned this on a previous show too, we construct time at the level of the seventh chakra, the crown chakra. And time encodes this entire reality. Right? This time, we know, actually, from relativity, that time and space are inextricable, that matter, they're bent around matter. So space, time, matter are all actually all encoded together in just time, in just what this time is. And of course, there are other times. But we construct this one at the level of the seventh chakra, right? And that's why that bigger self that we merge into when we do go into the fourth attention is so elusive, is because we actually have to transcend time in order to get there. It exists outside of time. And the rest of the seven chakras that we see in our body are the part that exists within this time, after it has been constructed at the level of the seventh chakra. This is the time-bound aspect of us, relative to this one particular time. And this time that we get here, we're highly entrained in terms of what the time that we create and what the corresponding reality that we construct is. Right? It's it's coming from those previous generations. It's coming from our ambient culture. It's coming from all sorts of pressures that do exist on us energetically, even before we have an extrinsic reality to look at and see a teacher scolding us for getting the wrong answer or whatever it be. We're taught how to construct this crazy world.
Yeah, well, I
And,
mean, like, that's what school is, right? Sit down, shut up, stay in one place, focus on your work, whatever, they dictate your work is. You can take a break when the bell rings. It's basically, you have to, like, have roll call. Yes, I'm here. So you have all these things that are making you responsible to be part of a labor force.
Well, it's prison.
Yeah.
It's practice for prison, isn't it?
Exactly.
I mean, that's what all of this society really is structured around, is just imprisoning people.
Yeah, money,
and
labor.
So
one of the things I was going to... Can I intervene
go ahead.
just for a second?
Yeah.
Well, I was just thinking about when you were talking about, how there's a point where they're, past, present, and future, it's all simultaneously, right? And I have teachers that have really, kind of taught this. And I remember one of the more crazier time things that has ever happened to me in this, in this reality was back in 2015 when I had my show. And a lot of people like Ryan have found me through my old shows that I did with Lujan Matus. And you can find those on my YouTube channel, Consciousness of Economics and Urban Farm Project. You have to go way back. I did 2. I was lucky enough to get 2 interviews with Lujan. And back then, Lujan didn't interview with anyone. And so I get this email out of the blue that he was interested in being on my show. And we needed to do a show where I don't think the show was live. It was aired after the fact because he needed a certain timeline because he was like in Cambodia or something like that. And so I had to get up at like 5 o'clock in the morning or something like that. And my producer put it all together. Uh-oh. Hold on a second. Ryan, are you there? Uh-oh. Ryan, I think, just kicked himself off. Hold on. Let me just get him back. Let's see. We're calling him. Hold on. All right. Ryan, are you there? I hear something going on in the background. Okay, anyway. Like some clicking. Hey, did you kick yourself off?
No, my phone lost connection. I had an incoming call, which I was ignoring. And then all of a sudden it just decided to break the connection with you.
Yeah, all right. Know. Well, I'll just keep an eye on it because sometimes, this kind of stuff happens. I've got to watch the technical stuff going on. Okay, so anyway, so the first show I did with Lujan was out of the blue. He wanted to do it in 5 days, so I had to get my producer and everything, online and explain to them, like, he doesn't, at that point in time, he just really didn't do any interviews. So for 5 days, what happened is that I had to, at every turn, like there was this energy field and I could feel it like slip out of my hand. And I realized it was Lujan. And so in order to make this show work, there was like a connection that had to be made. Like I had to connect with him through a different timeline because he literally is living in multiple timelines. And I had to like nail him down, drag him kind of in to get him onto the show at a certain, this reality timeline. And it was
He's
tough.
Out of phase with it, and I can't blame him for that.
Yeah, so I had to really do a lot of, and it really provoked a lot of internal work that I needed to do during that 5-day time. So I was in all kinds of timelines and all kinds of different stuff. And after 5 days of like some pretty harsh work, man, I at the last minute, we got it together, we got on, and it was, it was smooth sailing after that. So, going back to, once you start to move your attention to a bigger attention to the different levels of attention, you start to realize like there are a lot of other fields operating, and people like Lujan or Carlos. I'm not so sure Carlos was there, but Lujan for sure. Don Juan Matus, Lynn Andrews. There's some other people out there that, have reached kind of areas where they're living in their physical body, but their timelines, they're all over the place in past, present, and future, and it's all happening simultaneously.
Well, and it's not even necessarily linear. Time, when, at a certain level, it becomes more than just a one dimension. There's a vastness of time.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the way that I've experienced it, doing, like ceremonial type work, we're talking more kind of the shamanism or native work, is that it just is, I call it the no thing. Once you reach kind of, I don't know, the top, or you become part of, a unified body of energy, time, experiences, and there's no boundaries or ends. But it's interesting, you know what I mean? Like, it's interesting dealing with people who surpass, any kind of restrictions, like Lujan, or limitations, and trying to deal with him, like in a physical way.
Right. Well, but limitations, I mean, yeah, we self-impose those. They're not, we're not meant to be these limited things that we think we are. And, I mean, that's just getting back to nature. That's really what the whole thing is all about. Getting back to the beings that we're meant to be and develop into, rather than being held back at this kind of kindergarten stage of development that we find ourselves in. And, I mean, sometimes I look at the world and I think it's being run by 4-year-olds, because that's about as much sense as it makes. But we've thought our way into this. There's a Daniel Quinn quote that I kind of want to throw in here to set up the discussion about this kind of heaven and hell thing. So he says, "There's nothing fundamentally wrong with people. Given a story to enact that puts them in accord with the world, they will live in accord with the world. But given a story to enact that puts them at odds with the world, as yours does, they will live at odds with the world. Given a story to enact in which they are lords of the world, they will act like lords of the world. And given a story to enact in which the world is a foe to be conquered, they will conquer it like a foe. And one day, inevitably, their foe will lie bleeding to death at their feet, as the world is now." And that's from Ishmael.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good. No, the thing is like, that's the thing, is it's all really a story, and, trying to figure out what your story is, what story you're playing out in the 3,500 years of cellular, I mean, just with the biological suit, what that story is, and bringing it to an end so that you don't have limitation of story. Because I think, pretty much when you choose an archetype, or the archetypes are going to play out, or they've been chosen for you because your family members have already acted them out, you have to kind of, in this world, there's archetypal features, and so you end up having to play it out. It goes back to that whole thing in the beginning. We don't really have that much physical time here. I wish it was just a little bit faster to kind of wake up to the fact that it's all just not real. Let's just get to the clincher so that I can, do something else.
Right, and that's, that's coming in from the system, from the Tyrant system. So we've talked about the Tyrant before. I'm going to have to set this up a little bit. because I was talking about time. I did this a little bit out of the order that I was thinking of, but I've just been getting my coffee down me as we've been talking. It's been a little bit of a weird day. Sleep's been spotty lately, so I wasn't up early to get my thoughts together. But the Tyrant, another name for the Tyrant, the Greek name was Kronos, right? The god of time, or the Titan of time, right? And because, and of course, in Gnosticism they call it the demiurge, which has this feature of creating a false, illusory reality to trap people in, which is exactly the truth. But that reality is encoded in the time. And that was the point that I was making earlier. And we associate Kronos, the Tyrant, the demiurge, with Saturn as well, the Roman god Saturn, which is this god of order, right? This earthy presence, but the god of structure. But it's also, if you look at a chart of the chakras, Saturn is always placed on the crown chakra. And so all of these things go together because time itself is an aspect of thought. We construct time with our thoughts, which is why that the mind chakra is associated, or is first of all constructing the timeline and thereby the reality that we dwell in, but also how this malevolent being has really corrupted and perverted the reality that we do construct in order to trap us here. And it's all happening at the level of the crown chakra. And but it's about manipulating our thoughts. And because, well, let's delve into the system a little bit, and let's get back down to kind of earthly topics. Let's just look at the system, right? The one that is obvious to us. We have actually this kind of structure in our reality where we've got a crooked political system and a crooked financial system, and they prop each other up, right? Neither one can fall because they're leaning against each other, and they've got the threat of violence on their side, basically. They've got this whole coercive control, again, ordering people, putting serial numbers on people, making them inmates in their own world. And all of this is just a thought, though. Like, there is no such thing as the government. There is no such thing as money, right? I mean, even the little pieces of paper or coinage that we may pass around only has the value that we believe it has. That's all done with our minds. None of it is intrinsic. And the government, I mean, yeah, okay, so what they have is weapons, right? I mean, the government, the whole tradition of government is just a giant protection racket. It's like, back in medieval times, or hitherto, but whatever. Well, there was this specialization of trade, and the lords, right? The aristocracy, the lords, and ultimately kings and queens, the government, the authorities, were precisely those families whose trade, right? Because the son goes into the same line as the father. There's a whole... but those were the families who specialized in violence, That was their trade. And then they just imposed whatever bullshit they decided to cook up on the rest of us because they had the guns or the swords or whatever the case may be in the epic that you investigate. But so the government has the threat of violence on its side, but that threat of violence is only perpetrated. I mean, it's only perpetuated by people's belief in it. For example, the enforcers, the police in our societal case, armed thugs to enforce whatever these rulers, self-appointed rulers, because guess what? Voting doesn't make a shit bit of difference. These self-appointed rulers write down on paper and tell them, oh, well, we will hold everyone accountable to this. Well, those hired guns only keep working for their masters as long as they think the authority that those people hold over them is real. Right? They would use those guns to protect their families and look after their own. They wouldn't go around bullying people and telling others how to live their lives and writing traffic tickets and all sorts of different things if, they wouldn't just take that upon themselves. It's all based on a thought, a lie, this notion of authority. And, right, whether it's the divine right or now they think that it's the government of the people, which it's not. The whole line that this authority, this system has legitimacy is just a thought in people's heads. And without that thought, the entire thing breaks down.
Yeah. Well, it goes back to that inherited behavioral. So one of the extremity things that I've seen as of late is like the animal control. We'll just talk about animal control so people kind of understand this. But so it used to be that the animal control became because of the abused animals. There were so many abused animals everywhere. So it was kind of started, like that to help deal with, the animals that are injured and abused and things like that. And now, because they've turned themselves like into an agency, and over the period of, maybe 100 years or something like that, they have turned into, the mafia. And in order to make money, I watch them stalk, which is against the law, right? Animal control can't keep driving, sneak in and drive around these parks where people have dogs. That's stalking. The only way that they're allowed really to go to a place is if, there's some kind of complaint, right? So nowadays, they have, county licenses for your animals. They have city licensing for your animals, and people comply to it because it's been going on for, maybe the last 30 years. And so people just, register their dog. They get into contract. And once you get into contract through the registration, then they kind of own your dog and your property. So if they want to come onto your property, you've given them full right to give on your property through your animal. And you could come home and the animal could be totally gone out of your yard because, they have authority over your animal. It becomes their property. And so then they use it as a weapon of extortion, right? They use it to terrify people into getting the dog all these, vaccines. Now you should get your animals, one set of vaccines and then, be done with it pretty much. But they get you to extort, and then the vets are murdering dogs through over vaccination, just like humans, but probably more extreme rate. But people comply to it because it's part of that inherited behavioral system. I don't have a kid, but my kid, if I would have registered my dogs and they had dogs, they would have just registered them because that's just how it is. They wouldn't have really thought about it. And the more that pattern develops, it becomes almost genetic, changes and shifts your DNA so that it's hard. So there's this really great story That's really taken me kind of a long time to really kind of work through on the, hereditary level. So there's a story, and Bruce Lipton talks about it. And if anybody out there should really look into Bruce Lipton's work, he'll blow you away. But he talks about this kid, and he was like this piano phenom. And, but his parents are somewhere in his belief systems, he always has this sense, this collective thought that, he's not good enough. And I think in the physical world, he was even told that early on, but he was like one of the top piano phenoms in the world, even at a young age. And I can't remember what his name is. But when he became 18, he got offered to play at like wherever the, major piano, concert place is. It's like, a really big deal. So he went there to play, and he was phenomenal. But halfway through, there was like this moment where he broke free and was going to like, be completely, full on expressed as who and what he was and his full potential. And so what happened was then he went into it and just really played, and it was just like super incredible. And, people were just, immersed deeply in it. And then through the whole thing, what happened at the end of the performance, the kid actually fell over onto the piano. And from that point on, he was like in a mental hospital. And Bruce Lipton talks about, genetics, cells. He was one of the first stem cell researchers. And he says there's a point in time where, there could actually be, a significant physical break in your reality, when you reach those levels. But anyway, isn't that kind of an interesting story? And so he had to break through his cellular systems, and then of what he thought or he was, what his reality was, and then, kind of fried his circuits because he did it all kind of in one hi-ya. So, sometimes go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, some of these shamanism concepts or, sorcery concepts or whatever, dreaming, stalking, a lot of those kinds of terms are used. But, it always comes back. There's a word that they call like the shamanic death, which, you're constantly putting yourself into scenarios that are pushing that boundary so that you can have a death. You know what I mean? So it's like you break the wall down so there's no disconnection anymore. Anyway, go ahead. I'm just kind of having like an out there day.
I mean, ego death is a huge part of, even exploring some of the other planes that exist. It's a necessary step, and we do have to break down all of these thoughts about who we were. I wanted to jump back for a second and point out, just because I was champing at the bit when you're talking about the dog thing, and like, people do that to their kids. They register their kids as property of the government. They put their kids through these vaccine regimens. Of course, they're going to do it to their animals, which are their animals anyway. But it's exactly the type of thing that it's the thought process. Okay, so we get into trying. Right, we're mentally aware. We can project and extrapolate based on our reality, based on patterns that occur and whatever. And who knows? Maybe I'm going to paraphrase the Bible here for a second because it kind of makes the point. It also ties back to the Daniel Quinn thing. Is when so the birds of the field don't plan for tomorrow, right? they eat and they crap and they move on. And people are stuck worrying about the next day's food, right? We worry ourselves to death about dying, and then we die anyway. Whereas the animals don't ever think about it. They end up dying, but at least they didn't spend their lives worrying about it. And so, you know, there are droughts, famines, whatever. There are natural things that occur, but and people living in a natural kind of indigenous way do have to deal with these things, but they don't have to. They don't live their lives hostage to the possibility. What we do in our cultural mindset is we try to contrive everything. We have to contrive our entire world to be exactly the way we think it should be, and safe and whatever. We don't allow ourselves to live off the bounty of this world, off the bounty of the earth. We have to plant crops in lines and make sure that they're going to survive so that we can store up for the winter. And there's nothing wrong with the principle of agriculture or the principle of saving for the winter and what have you. But it becomes this compulsion, right? It's now we have to, if there's any local fauna that's going to eat these crops, we have to kill them off. And then, every single thing we have to pin in our own animals and then kill the wolves so that they don't eat them. And we just try to impose our arbitrary order on things. It's a complete contrivance, and we're trying to insulate ourselves from just the flow of reality. And yeah, there's some randomness to that. But instead of trying to insulate ourselves from the random, we could actually just flow with it, and things would work a lot better. That's kind of a natural. That's a nature based approach.
Okay, sorry about that. All right. So, go ahead, keep going.
And what we do instead is we try to contrive the whole picture. We can't let there be any loose ends, any variables, any question marks, and but then we deprive ourselves. I mean, first of all, if there's no question marks, if there's no mystery, then there's no wonder, right? If we did completely realize this goal of trying to contrive our own worlds, and everybody lives in this perfectly homogeneous space with, perfectly, reliable food and perfectly, perfect safety, perfect whatever. I mean, what a drag. That is hell, right? I mean, there's nothing to even live for.
When I had this, I went and did this. I went and did a pretty heavy, I don't like to mess with a lot of dreamy medicines. It's not really what I like. I have a hard enough time, like, trying to stay in my body and trying to function. And I want to be sober when I'm working, transitioning through my systems. But anyway, I don't know how long ago it was. I got invited to this ceremonial, like, DMT ceremony, and there was like 6 other people there. There was the person who was basically, the person who was giving the medicine, and also had a relationship to the medicine, and then helped us. And each person, went on their journey, separate. one at a time, and then you kind of like, hold the space or whatever for them. And each person could be gone, in physical time frame, like, in an hour or 2 hours, just really depended. But one of the things that happened during the course of this experience was that I crossed over into this thing I call the no thing. And then when I had to come back, I can feel my heart. I can feel myself shaking talking about this experience, because it was really, really intense. But anyway, when I came back here, I had like no recollection on how to do things anymore. I had a really hard time trying to figure out how to get dressed again. And I was having a problem getting things on backwards. And it would take me like an hour just to get dressed. And I just really was so overwhelmed with this experience and how tedious, every little aspect of our life is. Put the clothes on, they have to be on in a certain way. You have to, do this, you have to do that. And my friend who I was staying with, I ended up having to stay like a few weeks more because I was so not right in order to even drive back home. But I remember like her telling me to make, like a pot of chili. And I couldn't even remember what was in chili. At one point, after about a half hour of thinking about it, I had to ask her, like, I don't even know anymore what you put in chili. What is chili? And how extreme it had to be in order for me to realize, like, about this world, and how it is like a prison of tasks, constant kind of a thing. Anyway, do you have anything to add? Are you there? Oh, good.
Yeah,
You're
I'm
still
here.
there.
So, I mean, it is. It's tedious, and it's. Dealing with all the structure, it ties up all of our time, so that we don't have time to actually appreciate the world and experience that we find ourselves in. And I'm not going to have time. We're going to have to go to break pretty soon, I think. But
yeah. So tell us right now. Tell us how to find you. What's your website?
Oh, it's rallymoore.com. RALLYMOORE.com. I haven't done a lot with it. I did announce it last time on your show, and I've been wanting to get some videos up there, but unfortunately, I don't have videographical equipment. I've had a series of technical difficulties preventing me from getting this show off the ground. So I have some music up there and a couple of things, but not a whole lot at the moment. More will be coming as I grapple with just the technical realities of the situation. Again, that financial system constraining my actions, which seems like a constant in life, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yes, that's true. All right. So you're listening to Carrying Stones and Digging Holes radio show on Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. And I'm your host, Bridgette Lyn Dolgoff. And today I have Ryan Hunter on. And we're about ready to go to commercial promos. And you can find me under schedule on the website, pick Studio A, scroll down to the 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And you'll see a bee on a flower. Click on that, and there's some bio information, contact information if you want to contact me. And we just heard what RallyMoore.com is Ryan's website that he's building. All right, we'll see you back in 4 minutes. Mute.
Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. And we'll be right back after this message.
Hello, all you good-looking people out there in Revolution Radio. This is Mario. I invite you to join me Thursdays at 6 o'clock for This, That, and the Other. It's a show about you, it's a show about me, but ultimately it's a show where we try to have a little bit of fun. We discuss some quirky topics, and we do our best to be apolitical. So I invite you, put on your favorite pair of comfy sweats, your smoking jacket, and grab a beverage of your choice, and join me Thursday evenings at 6 o'clock for This, That, and the Other on Revolution Radio.
Enter into a world unseen on Raven Star's Witching Hour. You will encounter eclectic topics from the realm of spirit brought into our matrix of truth. With your host, the Solaris Blue Raven. Solaris will bring you an array of unique guests covering topics from ghostly spirits to amazing anomalies, covert technology, UFOs, and shadowy global events.
And that's right here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, Saturdays, midnight till 2 a.m. Eastern Time. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
Let the magic rise.
From the astral realms to the physical plane, the halls of power to the walls of home, the multiverse to the innerverse, all will be haunted by the ghost in the machine. I am Steve Zerloff, the ghost in the machine. Mondays, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Studio B. Exclusively here on Revolution.Radio.
It happens more often than we can imagine. In my case, I was sitting at home, and out of nowhere, I just started feeling uncomfortable. Then it got worse, and I started perspiring. I tried to ignore it, but I waited too long. The chest pain came as we were driving to the hospital emergency. I felt my life clock begin to tick. I barely survived. There was lots of damage done to my heart. What do I do now? I was lucky. I took a leap of faith and tried a 7-herb formula with hawthorn, garlic, cayenne, and more called Extendivite. Herbs have been used for thousands of years to keep us healthy. If you're not using Extendivite as a preventative supplement, maybe it's time to start. To order, call 1-877-928-8822 or visit heartdrop.com.
Extend your life with Extendovite.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Hey everybody, we're back. This is Bridgette Lyn Dolgoff, your host of Carrying Stones and Digging Holes radio show, and I am at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Revolution Radio. And today I have Ryan Hunter, and we are in the second hour of our conversation. So I know when you were on break, Ryan, you probably were like, hey man. Oh, hey, are you there? Oh, you are.
Yeah,
there.
I'm here.
Okay. I had to make sure because we lost you once, so I have to pay attention. All right, so you're probably on the break. We're thinking about some stuff, so go ahead, rock and roll. No.
Well, I did. Well, there was an ad on that break that I haven't heard before. Somebody with a show called The Ghost in the Machine, right? Which is funny because my show, which again, episode 1 is still in the works due to my technological facilities. But my show is called Ghosting the Machine. It's a very, so I don't know. I mean, obviously that's an old common phrase, but I hadn't no prior knowledge that there was a show on this station with such a similar name. Anyway, so Ghosting the Machine, the system, this is what we're talking about, and let's go ahead and ghost it. So, but in order to, you got to understand where it comes from. Again, it's a mental approach to reality where we're trying to contrive everything to suit our own selves, rather than allowing things to manifest, allowing the spirit to manifest, because that's what actually manifests, is the spirit. And it's true. I mean, sorcery wouldn't exist if that couldn't be, nudged or whatever. But there's really no value in contriving your reality. You just deprive yourself of the wonder of finding out what naturally happens. I mean, the spirit is really, so the super conscious, right? It's you have to take that journey into what you call the no thing, or the untempered void. You have to get away from the everything in order to be undistracted enough to appreciate what the spirit really is. But when you find the spirit, you'll realize that, so it's this, it's hard to say. It's not a thing. It has no thingness. It has no beingness. It is sort of a force. It has intent, but it has no agenda. It has no consciousness, but it is beyond consciousness. It orchestrates the flow of everything. And the intent of the spirit is, if you like, the holy intent. That is the sacred way. And our whole civilization is, it reminds me of if anybody has seen the show Fawlty Towers, there's a brilliant scene where John Cleese is, jumping up and down, shaking his fist at the sky. Thank you, God. Thank you so bloody much. It is, we're kind of shaking our fists at the sky and trying to subvert or undo the intent of the spirit and make our own way happen. Which is cheesy because, then we deprive ourselves of the actual wonder of being. We create this just mawkish, just grid-like. Why? Why do we create this horrendous, boring, prison-like structure for ourselves to live in? Oh, well, we keep ourselves safe and fed. And I mean, humans really are experts at choosing the boring way out. But it's also, we're insulating ourselves. I want to talk about randomness and entropy a little bit, because what we're insulating ourselves from when we insulate ourselves away from the randomness of, the extrinsic world, I mean, those are the pressures that cause evolution, right? Without pressures of, hunger and the pressure of death, basically, all of the hardships that we try to push off and push away, and we just push it somewhere else, really. But all of that stuff that we try to keep at arm's length is exactly the stuff that causes us to improve on ourselves as a species. And without the pressure of death, there's no progress. We just stagnate in this particular state that we managed to get to. But it's not like this form of humanity is the end of the line. I mean, it may be in a negative way. It may be that we just feed our own undoing and never get beyond this point. But in principle, we should be continuing onward and upward. We shouldn't be just festering at this one level, this one stage in our development. And but we've pushed everything that could possibly challenge us enough to have to evolve out to arm's length, or at least that's what we try to do with our mental contrivances by, having these big farms and slaughterhouses and supply chains and all sorts of things to make sure that, there's no, and as you said at the beginning of the show, I mean, our efforts have undone themselves. There is actual shortage, and there will be privation. I mean, there always is privation, but with some of the genetic modification, some of the different things that people have done with the actual food supply, we've opened the door for, and weather modification, the list goes on. There's all sorts of things that we've tampered with without knowing what we're actually doing. But we've opened up, the possibility for just massive shortages because we're all dependent on this one system for survival now. And as soon as, one Monsanto thing goes awry, or there's one particular virus that affects, our livestock that are all, the same genotype, and it just wipes everything out and people can't even exist. But that to the side, we're trying to hold death out away from us, and it keeps us from ever being challenged enough to actually grow and evolve, both individually and as a species. But I'm talking about the biological pressures that drive evolution as a species. All of our attempts to contrive our world and make it, perfectly nice for us is actually preventing the species from ever making progress in biological terms. And it's strange because there's some conceptions of randomness. There is really a contradiction in the way, not the way randomness expresses in this world, but the way people think about it. Okay, so because there's one of the things that Christian types of people like to say a lot, they talk about the second law of thermodynamics, right? Entropy. Entropy increases with time. In fact, a lot of sciencey type people will tell you, entropy is interesting because it will actually pick out a direction for time, because they just subscribe to this idea of the second law of thermodynamics. Entropy always increases. And so what entropy is a measure of the randomness of a system, right? So the second law of thermodynamics says that things go from states of order to progressive states of randomness. And that way, randomness and time itself is seen as a denigration, a deteriorating force, right? It just sort of erodes away the structure that we're valiantly erecting this, structure to organize the universe, and the universe is just wearing it down over time. But there's a problem with these notions. And the very primary problem is randomness itself. Now, randomness There's a great Dilbert cartoon about this, but I don't. So they're wandering through some fictitious land on the interior of a computer system, some server or whatever, and they come across this monster that's saying, whatever, 99, 99, 99. Oh, well, who is that? Oh, that's a random number generator. 99, 99. Well, it doesn't seem very random to me. 99, 99. Well, that's the problem with randomness. You can never tell. Right? What is randomness? We don't know. If we could pin it down, it wouldn't be random. Right? That's the whole notion of it. And, there's kind of some of those more depressing, European humanist philosophies. Oh, well, reality is cruel and random, or, whatever. The random, in a certain sense, gets a real stank in our cultural mindset. And, again, because we don't like the random, we want to contrive everything. But if you come down to it, I mean, randomness is completely undefinable. And not only can you not get your hands on it, if you pry into the concept a little bit, you're going to find that it's not what we call randomness is not something different from order. It is just the underlying order of the universe. And it's the part that we can't put terms on because it exists everywhere. And that is, well, a manifestation of the spirit. I mean, there is really a sacredness to random, to the random, to randomness. I mean, and of course, all sorts of traditions of divination have, relied on this, whether it's tarot, whether it's, casting the bones or reading the tea leaves. It's all finding out what the actual order of randomness is in a certain way. It's a way of accessing the intent of the spirit through aspects of things that we cannot control, that we don't contrive for ourselves, because as soon as we can contrive it, we'll just make the answer whatever we want it to be. But if we can't control it, then reality will evince itself, and the spirit will tell you what's going on.
Yeah, and maybe that's why it's so hard. So in this world, we deal with stuff that's the same, non-random, right? And like, say, for example, I do a session online with, say, a mother, right? And then, I see maybe their daughter or another family member. A lot of times there is no randomness in their energy spread and how they behave in the world, no matter where they live, if they live separated from each other, but they all carry like the do-over, you know what I mean? The constant patterning that starts to assemble in the, DNA and the RNA from, hereditary development or, collective inherited behavior. So in order to know spirit, you have to radically change that kind of stuff, because it takes the random out of it. I think maybe because of the behavior modifications from your parents and your family and how we do things and how things are done. And it's a lot of it is that stops you or blocks you or confuses you, has to do with it. It's been nonverbal.
Well, and it's brainwashing. It's mind control. That stuff isn't contained to MK Ultra or whatever.
No,
it's really the way our society operates. Is
and it's
is
pretty
conditioning
covert.
people.
Yeah.
Well, and the thing is, I mean, there's a whole structure that goes beyond. Actually, let me finish my other thought, and then we'll get into that, because so we are contriving things against the random forces, which again, we see entropy as this degrading force. But on the other hand, randomness is what drives evolution. So we always say that systems go from a state of order to chaos, basically, which, again, that's a really stilted statement because it depends on our own concepts of what order and randomness actually are, which we don't have a well-founded concept of randomness, and our concept of order is really very arbitrary. It's just whatever suits our needs. We like to make grid patterns and whatever, very boring kind of order. But then we look at a biological system as something that's highly ordered, that is not, really doesn't conform to the human patterning of what order really is. When we look at biological systems, they behave like machines in a certain way, but they don't look like machines. They are much more sophisticated than that. And their order is much more subtle and could be missed in a certain way because we don't have grid patterns or whatever existing in the body or in plant life or whatever organism you're looking at. But we consider them to be manifestations of a high degree of order because they're living systems and they self-replicate and blah, blah, blah. Well, actually the force of randomness causes them to evolve and to proliferate and to diversify. It causes just the beauty of this world. We've destroyed a lot of it, but there's still plenty of natural beauty on this planet that we can stand back in awe of. Oh, all of these different forms have been created, through the pressure of death, basically, through randomness, through that random intent of the spirit. All of these various forms have manifested, have just come about by the random processes. And I look at life as kind of a counter to this second law of thermodynamics. It's like, because one of the classic statements about the second law of thermodynamics is that it disproves the possibility of a perpetual motion machine. But what is life other than a perpetual motion machine? Right? As soon as one unit wears out, it has replicated itself in order to keep the motion going. And certainly we can look at vaster and vaster timescales and say, oh, well, there's no way that, life will survive indefinitely. But we don't really know that. We have to go to timescales that are far beyond anyone's experience in order to try to justify a statement like that. And anyway, getting back to the point, our contrivance is, on the one hand, opposed to, it really is just opposed to randomness. And we see that as a degrading force, but it's also the source of everything that's beautiful in our world, of everything that makes it even worthwhile to try to exist, which was the motivating idea, right? Survival was the whole motivating instinct to trying to contrive our world in the first place. Right? When we try to suit our environment to ourselves, that was because we liked living. And we just wanted to make it, all work easily. And we've just made a mess for ourselves. Like you said, there's so many different things that we have to do to exist in the system anymore, right? We've made life more and more complicated rather than making it simpler and easier. And the real pity of it is that the education system leaves you dependent on the financial system, leaves you stuck in this prison system that they've created, because they systematically, I'm using the word system a little much, but they systematically deprive you of the knowledge of how to exist just as a human on this earth, right? Living off the bounty of the planet rather than buying into all of these notions of, property and money and exchange and buying food at a supermarket and so on, right? Working a job in order to get that money.
The thing is, and what's most scary is that we have allowed it to take place.
Right, we've just gone along with it.
Yeah, and now it's hereditary to where people just do it. They go through the motions that the system wants or requires.
But we've stepped away from the real world, the natural world. Eden, again, our paradise lost.
Exactly.
We had this world and it was good. And we stepped into this mental construct, right? The hell system, the tyrant system that we all partake in is still just mental phantasmagoria. It doesn't actually exist. Just like the value of money isn't real, it's propped up by our belief. All of this, paperwork structure, all of this notion, like owning the earth. Nobody owns the earth. That's ridiculous. Owning an animal or another person, which is even today possible in certain places, no, that doesn't make sense. Property is a huge area of just bullshit in our society. Not that there isn't a practical notion of property, but we've built it into this thing that is just farcical. And
it kind of reminds me of that story, and I can't remember what the guy's name was. I read his book quite a while ago, and he was supposedly, I do not know this for a fact. He supposedly was working with the Palladians and some, I think. And anyway, he was getting visited, and the Palladians, I'll try to make this really fast, but the Palladians said to him, hey, we don't understand the money system here, so could you, spend a lot of time figuring this? Actually, he wrote all this in the book, like as nonfiction, his experience. And he said that they wanted to know everything about the money system because they didn't really get it. They didn't really understand the money system. So they said, okay, we're going to come back in like 6 months. So he spends 6 months making this grand, presentation and with everything on it and, things written down. And he's, going to give them a massive presentation about the money system of Earth. And so he goes through the whole like Rothschild stuff, and he learns things that he had no idea, about. And he shows them how money was created originally, goes through all this stuff. And, he's really proud of himself. After he gets done with like this 6-hour, this time world presentation, one of the Palladians or beings stands up and looks him in the eye and says, thank you so much for this presentation. It was really thorough. It was really informing. But what we can't wrap our minds around is that you were somehow born on a planet that has unlimited resources, unlike a lot of planets. And you have to have a job to pay money for those resources when just by your birthright, those resources belong to you.
Right, and that's the way the system is structured. The usurious money system is just designed to create debt that builds and builds and builds and can never be paid. It creates scarcity, artificial scarcity, and that's one of the points that I was trying to get back to. We live in a world of abundance. We can't just live off the bounty of this world, because our constant worry about eating tomorrow means that we live in constant famine. Just because we tried to prevent famine, now we just create scarcity for ourselves on a daily basis, instead of just every, several years there might be some scarcity. Now it's all the time, because of the system that we've done to prevent the scarcity. And of course, the system is contrived in order to steal wealth away from the people toward those who put themselves at the top, right? And it's the same thing with the legal system. It's full of, loopholes and contradictions and catch-22s, to where they can trap you at any time. They'll just use this word magic, this, silly constructed system of paperwork to try to catch you up at, whatever you do. If they want to, you're basically liable to them under their system, but their system is imaginary. And it only exists because we choose to comply with it on a daily basis. And that's the whole thing, is when we stepped out of Eden, we stepped into an artificial reality. And so let's get into the bigger structure. I don't want to say the higher structure. It's really the lower structure. It comes out of the lower planes, the Tyrant system, because it's not just, there are many social pressures. There's the biology, but then there's a bigger system when you expand your awareness a little bit, right? There's the foreign mind that gives people their beliefs that, you can really see it once you get out of the box a little bit. And I've been thinking out of the box for a long time. It's only in the last, maybe 4 or 5 years that I've really started voicing a lot of that stuff. Because I tried prior to that, but it was just I got so little traction that I kind of kept a lot of things to myself. But you can really see it. You can observe. Okay, you start speaking a little truth, and it'll just trigger people, and they'll just fly off the handle. And it's not them. It's not really that person that's flying off the handle. It's the foreign mind trying to defend itself.
It's Agent
fearing
Smith.
Discovery.
It's Agent Smith in the Matrix.
Yeah. And people think that is their own mind. They just listen to it constantly. It's like in people's minds, what they are is they're just in kind of a zombie-like comatose state, watching this signal that's just being projected at them, and they think that's their own thoughts. They don't have any of their own thoughts, because all they've done is be a mental couch potato their entire lives. They've never gotten up off the couch and tuned out the signal for a moment to realize that they actually have independent thought. Or that signal that's being broadcast at them isn't actually independent. It's really scary how much people think alike, and they don't even really acknowledge it.
Yeah, I remember. So the story of, was thinking about the story of Eckhart Tolle. I'll make it quick, but he wrote The Power of Now and Stillness and Earth something. But anyway, one of the things he said is when he was going through college and academia, because he was becoming, I think he's a mathematician actually, like you. He was getting his doctorate of mathematics and blah, 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 blah. And one of the things he started to notice was that the higher that people kind of went in academia, the more they talked to themselves, where he kind of considered that they kind of are crazy. And he was hoping, like when he got his PhD and stuff like that, that wasn't going to happen to him. Well, lo and behold, he's working, some years later, he's working at Cambridge University as a math professor. and he has a total break, such a serious mental break that he goes to the park that's close to there and actually becomes a homeless person on a park bench for years. And one of the things is after he recovers, after a couple of years, he starts to notice like what the birds are doing and that people don't have a time frame. And, he starts to really take a look at the construct, that he'd been living in. But he was thinking like these academic people because he had a full emotional and mental break. Just like he saw, in them talking to themselves and, their behavior, he'd become just like that. Because of the thinking, the training and the programming or whatever else. But it took an act of homelessness for him to, elevate himself in a way, past limitations. But, homelessness, that kind of homelessness could be a serious shamanic death, especially for the ego. Because you have to break with everyone once you cross that line. Right. They'll break with you. Anyway, go on.
Well, I was having that kind of thought last week, a week ago, Saturday, and just how much like people do not live in the real world. So I was watching the clouds. Who does that past the age of 7? It's really sad. I was just watching the clouds and I was listening to the birds. I saw the birds. I was engaging with, physical reality. I mean, not even actively. I was just taking it in. But people are so preoccupied with their imaginary world of human affairs that they can't even see what's right in front of them. They don't even engage with the actual material world because they're always running around on the wheel upstairs, just trying to figure out what their next move is. And, after work, I'm going to watch this show and I'm going to go get drunk and I'm going to, whatever it is, like stupid, trivial bullshit, but they're just constantly doing that. Right. And we're all guilty of it. I'm not trying to put the onus on others completely. We've all been kind of acculturated into this kind of, this aspect of just mentally trying to contrive everything. But that contrivance is the gate of hell. So when we develop our minds, and I think I've probably talked about this on the show previously. I'm not going to have time to do it out in great detail, but right, I talk about there are 3 basic frequencies that our mind can vibrate at in this material world. And the lowest is dogma, and that's where most people are. That's where this society exists at, because they're just listening to the foreign mind. It gives them beliefs, and they operate according to their beliefs. All of this like paperwork fantasy, like the legal system, the monetary system that's designed to steal wealth. We don't, if we were operating at the level of reason, which is the next overtone up, it's the next frequency that we can embody or mentally embody. If people were even rational, they'd be questioning the hell out of these things, right? I mean, they'd be skeptical, but they're not. They're operating out of a level of dogma, and they call it reason, but it's not. It's just memorizing a bunch of rote rules and just conventions, and this is the way things operate, and just going with that assumption. That's dogma. That is not reason. To get to reason, you have to ask questions. You have to doubt everything. But reason, again, isn't the end-all. We need reason to transcend our beliefs so that we can then actually go along to knowledge, right? Knowledge is then the highest vibration that we can achieve mentally while in our material bodies, right? But that's not the end of the story either, and this is kind of tying back to what I was talking about last time on your show, and I'm kind of trying to tie a few things that I've said previously together. Once you begin to, arrive at this state of knowledge, which is now characterized by certainty, you don't have the belief of dogma, and you don't have the doubt of reason. You have this sort of inexplicable certainty. You just can see what is. But as you do that, you may come on to realizations of, what sorceric power is. And the fact is, you can start playing the game at a higher level, trying to contrive your reality on an energetic level. Once you realize that you construct your own world, then you can try to make changes and whatever manifest. That's the whole thing, right? We're just starting at the beginning, talking about New Age and whatever. Some of this, practical magic. People like Chris Knowles who talk about chaos magic. This is what they're doing. This is also what the so-called elites, who are not elite in any way, but the so-called elites, they're only at the top of the game. They've created this slanted system because they couldn't actually compete in a level playing field. So really what they are is subhuman, they're not elite in any way. That's a common term in the truth movement or conspiracy, whatever. But I don't use the term elite for those people.
So this magic and stuff that they're involved in, like Ryan is talking about, is not random because they do the same kind of rituals and magic that they've been taught. So it loses its randomness. So their magic has sort of a certainty. And this is why they continue to play by the same rules. They haven't really changed their structure. And there are
the whole point is to contrive their reality.
Yeah. And yours.
They're playing that same game. Again, they're just looking for power, and they're trying to impose a structure on this world. And when you get to the point of knowledge, you can play that game, but you start to realize that it's not worth playing.
Exactly.
And so when you develop your mind to a certain point, it will lead you back into your heart. And when you open up your heart, then you can deal with the spirit and what needs to happen rather than what you think should happen. Right? And it does involve, it gives it, you have to loosen your death grip of trying to control your world up in order to achieve this, this greater experience of what reality even is. You can't contrive it. You have to just let it be and let it evince itself to you in order to appreciate it for the beautiful thing that it is. But what it is not this mentally constructed system that is straight out of hell. Right? I want to finish. I guess we won't get into some of the stuff I wanted to talk about with dreaming, but I want to finish at least talking about this contrast between heaven and hell, what we see, because in the classic breakdown, this material plane is kind of the dividing line between the lower planes and the higher planes. It's sort of, it's neutral. It's not heaven and it's not hell. The lower planes are the hell, the higher planes are the heaven, right? The upper worlds. But, and here is where we sort of negotiate the two. We exist at the dividing line, but if you want to see heaven, look to the natural world. There is the reflection of heaven right there. If you want to see hell, involve yourself in all of the things that people do. Involve yourself in all of this thought about stock prices and property and war and everything that people worry about, legislation, all of these things that are, I mean, at fundament, they are just mental delusions. Now, I mean, there is real war. People actually die. It has an actual footprint, you know. Legislation has a footprint. People go to prison for, you know, silly things, you know, spend life terms for, you know, nonviolent drug offenses and different things. But the root of all of that is just a mental construct. It's just putting this arbitrary thought patterning of how everyone should be and what the world should be, and we've just regimented ourselves into this grid pattern. Which, guess what? The grids are that's the bars of the prison right there. When they move you into these high density apartment type living, you know, residential situations,
yeah, paved roads.
You're confined in a little box. It is your prison cell, you know. That is the prison right there, and the prison is one that you still, even though it may, you know, manifest physically in certain ways, it's all really constructed fundamentally with your mind as you worry about contriving your own reality. And the way out is just to stop. To stop contrivance, return to spontaneity. Right? That's the opposite, is the spontaneous. And that's what randomness truly is. Instead of like this dark, degrading, eroding force that just turns all of our efforts to dust, what it really is this continually springing, spontaneous, just active, vibrant force that revitalizes reality. And the fact that we're just stuck on a dead system, on trying to impose this once for all rote dead structure on our reality, means that we are on the side of evil. We are not on the side of live, right? We're pursuing something that actually undoes everything that life is about, which is spontaneity and exploration and growth.
Yeah. So can I throw something in there? A couple things.
Yeah, please.
One of the things that I do working on people from apprenticeships, Ryan knows this kind of stuff about me, but and so doing a lot of this, you know, like, I don't know if you want to call it timeline work. I don't work with beings. I work with the stream, you know, the computer stream, I guess, is kind of like what it is, of, you know, past, present, and future. But one of the things that I really work with people on is the integration process, because one of the things I started to see early on is I see sometimes we have people here in this reality have 8 bodies. So we have like physical body, you know, mental body, emotional body, ether body, astral. There's like 8 bodies. The one that, and in order to be, I don't know if you want to call it unified, integrated, which is really important in order to actually, you know, be, I hate the word awake, but let's say, you know, getting up in that fourth attention, is the emotional body. Like the bodies will all be kind of spread over. It takes me a while sometimes to get them all kind of moving towards each other, but the one that is always the furthest away, and I've had to go searching for people's emotional bodies because their emotional bodies are so far away from them. And so in order to live more in a present moment or live on the side of natural law or in nature, we have to start dealing with how we feel and being able to connect that emotional body at least closer to us. So I've been watching this emotional body thing and teaching people and helping people to bring their emotional bodies closer for like 30 years. However, I went through a period where I had brain cancer, and when I was healing from that, I had some certain kinds of treatments, and I do these treatments too. I do the reboot. But during like about the fifth one I started getting paranoid because I could feel this thing like coming up behind me, like it was following me, and I couldn't figure out what it was. I'd never seen it before. I didn't understand it. It wasn't a ghost. It wasn't a demon. It wasn't anything, but I was totally scared of it because I could feel it, like behind me, like it was watching me and following me. And it kind of started to scare me a little bit. And then one day I realized it was my emotional body. And then I was like, okay, all right, we're good to go. But I had, through the process of developing, in this world, had basically been, punched in my energy field so many times that emotionally, like I just couldn't go there emotionally. And that pushed my emotional body further and further away. And it's really hard to be in the, be here now, like Ram Dass says, or it's hard to be there unless you can feel. And sometimes the feeling is the worst possible stuff that leaves you down on your hands and knees in a grocery store, hysterical, kind of event. But you have to bring that emotional body closer and closer to you so that you can get it back unified in your field so that you're integrated. Because all of that really important shifts and energy changes you can make are by feeling. It's a feeling. It isn't a thought. It isn't trying to do things. It's not being a human doing. It's not any of that stuff. It's just by feeling connects you.
Well, in the contrivance, our habit of mentally contriving in the world that we've contrived into existence collectively with this I don't know, psychosis, this mass psychotic projection that we have in this culture is it causes you to shut your heart down to where you can't access. I mean, you can't get in your heart. You can't discover your true feelings or even your connection back to spirit. And that's the problem. And sometimes, like my own path, I had to develop my mind to where I was realized true reason. And I started going beyond into knowledge before I really could appreciate the need to come back into the heart and to hold that open even when it was painful.
Yeah.
So that goes back to what we were talking about last time.
Yeah. So we've got like about 6 minutes. So I'm going to tell the story really fast because I told it to Ryan, I don't know, like 3 weeks ago. We talked about it. But I had this friend who was doing indigenous medicine. He was, from the descent of in South America. And he would take people, periodically he would get apprentices people would want to contact him to move down there and maybe study with him for a while. And so what he would do is he would do a test, but he wouldn't tell the people, but the test, helped him to understand how far the person had fallen away from Eden, because the turn back towards Eden was going to be a really long and difficult road. And so this is kind of like how he assessed them and whether he was willing to, take them on or not. So he would have him fly down to South America, and where he was at and where he lived, there was like this forest wall. There was he said there's like a really long wall, and it's like a jungle. You can't see side to side all the way. It just extends forever, and then it goes out from in front of you once you walk up to it all the way back. So it's endless. And so when he would go into this forest, right before he was getting ready to walk into it, like all the birds and the bugs and everybody loved him. They couldn't wait for him to get there to visit because he had a relationship with Eden or paradise or connected, to all his relations, right? And so they would be all chirping, and everybody would be really happy, like a big party when this indigenous medicine man would walk in there. So sometimes he said he would take people to this wall. He gives them instructions, and he would say, okay, I want you to walk in there and walk, to the stone or whatever back there, several hundred feet. Just walk right in there to there, pivot around a little bit for a couple of minutes, and then, come out. And they're like, oh, okay. And I mean, this was like, he said it jungle. So the person would go in, and he said that if there was no sound, like as they approached, this jungle wall for the test, if all of the birds and everything started to quiet and become silent, and then the person walked in and walked around and came out and nothing was heard, that had told him that how far distant he was from paradise, because paradise no longer communicated to him, and he no longer communicated to paradise. So he had been cast really far out of the Garden of Eden. So I always thought that was kind of an interesting, tall tale sign, and also a sign to know how healthy you're becoming, because you go out and you've got all these insects and stuff and birds and everybody that are just so excited to see you, when you go out in nature, and that's a good sign. It means you're kind of on the right path, especially with your heart and emotionally, I think.
Because they know, yeah. Animals can tell what kind of person you are. They don't have to, get to know you. They don't have all of these, doubts and limitations that people do. They just can sense what you are and whether you're a threat and what your intentions are. They know.
Yeah. Okay, so tell us what your website is again. So he's working on it, everybody, if you do go there.
Right. Yeah, you can see some music up there. I have a poem up there. I have a little bit of artwork, including my logo. But it will be getting expanded out as I'm able to make videos. It is Rallymoore, RALLYMOORE.com, and feel free to check it out.
Yeah, so we're coming into the last minute, and so you've been listening to Carrying Stones and Digging Holes radio show with Bridgette Lyn Dolgoff, your host. And this week we are talking to Ryan Hunter, a good friend of mine. And always a joy to have Ryan on and talk about different kinds of things, kind of explore some interesting, thoughts. All right, so when do you think you're going to start your little show called Ghosting the Machine? And we've got about 1 minute.
So I was trying to get it done a while back, and I really basically need a new income in order to finance the equipment needed to actually film it. that's the stumbling block at this point. I have many ideas for several shows, but
all right. Thanks everybody for listening. Thank you, Ryan. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you for having me.
Bye.
All right. Bye.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message. Welcome to Revolution Radio, where you, the listeners, are in charge. Here at Revolution Radio, we present 48 broadcast hours of news and information each and every day. Revolution Radio never sleeps. Revolution Radio is worldwide and borderless information. Revolution Radio is also commercial-free. Revolution Radio is supported 100% by you, the listeners. And that's why we appeal to you to donate and support this station and its expenses. You can support us in many available options like archive subscriptions, our seed pack selections, or even my woodworking store. And we also even have Revolution Radio's swag at the Revolution Radio Zazzle store, in which you can get t-shirts, coffee cups, even a baby onesie. Or you can just plain donate to the cause. We cannot continue without your support, and your support is what helps pay the bills. So please, if you wish us to continue, please stop by our station support page and drop a dime on us. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps. Is your data safe? Do you have the necessary information to assist you in confidently living through just about any survival situation? Is survival and gardening, off-grid living, medical knowledge, or even natural or man-made EMPs on your list of personal concerns? Do you have your documents and your personal information in a safe place in your hands where you know where it is? Well, check out our preloaded EMP-proof thumb drive. Over 3 gigs of survival documents and how-tos, plus the USDA offline food preservation website, and much, much more, including a surprise bonus we just can't tell you about here. With plenty of room left over to store your most important documents. Imagine if a megavirus or a computer failure took out your bank or all